Greg, it's great to have you on here on the Remote Sales Show. We were talking a little bit about sports before this, but we've got to steer ourselves back to sales, don't we? Tell us about yourself and your company.
Okay, so my name's Greg Freeman. I'm Vice President of Sales, very newly in position, only about 2 weeks ago. Clean.ai, as Dailius said, and we're a big data platform for data aggregation, data cleansing, and ultimately automating the process that data engineers perform. So it's a mid to big ticket item, mid-market enterprise sale.
So you're a new VP of sales at this company, and therefore you've come in at an interesting time, and where remote sales is not just a option, but probably the only option right now in the market. So you're crafting policies that are probably the newest out there. A lot of us have been doing the same thing for a couple of years, and this has been a little bit of a shock and awe type moment. Can you give us some advice around how we should manage our teams better in this remote environment?
Okay, so yeah, I think, and this probably refers a bit back to my old company's expertise as well. So I think the thing that you need to do, and this isn't from a micromanagement perspective, because I think a lot of people confuse micromanagement with knowing your numbers with micromanagement. It's not that at all. But I think you've got to keep the business running, to keep your sales process moving. You've really got to know your numbers, because when there's a change in any kind of business or sales team, there will always be an uplift in performance. It's one of those weird behavioral science things. You can even kind of hit people's commission package in some way, and there still will be a uniform improvement across the business in most cases. However, it's always a short-term thing, and I think that's the case with the remote working side of things. So your top performers will continue to be excellent, but your middle performers, your lower performers will have wanted to prove that they can be trusted at home and still hit numbers, still hit activity levels. But ultimately, their motivation is going to dwindle, and it's going to be way more difficult to maintain them when they're not in the office, they're not working with you directly, they're more difficult to coach, there's less contact. So definitely know your numbers, be tracking those conversion ratios, and just make sure that you're not seeing a drop off from your middle performers as time goes on. So I think we're in about week 5 now in the UK, probably about the same in the US and Australia as well. So it's about that time where you'll start to see those dips. And I think that's probably the first thing you've got to do, really focus on knowing your numbers and making sure they're staying where they are.
So let's kind of peel that back once more. So psychologically speaking, we see that if there's a big event or a big change, that normally correlates with some increase in performance. And perhaps I can draw an analogy, so to speak, of, for instance, you're on the racetrack and someone's coming up behind you in a race. So you get that little bit of endorphin kick to not want to lose. But as you said, that motivation may drop off over time, right? Our legs get a little sore. We get used to the conditions. So in order to compensate for that as leaders, we need to be tracking numbers and I'd probably say monitoring key metrics. What metrics do you think are important if we could pick a handful?
So I'd say new points of contact in is going to be a big one. Are they currently, do they currently have the confidence in the market, their own ability in the market, and I guess themselves overall, to be reaching out to new prospects and to people, or are they resting on their laurels and reconnecting with old people who might have heard of you already? Because there's definitely that psychological thing of it's a tough condition. Do I want to be the person that's bothering people who might already be struggling in these conditions? So I think that new contacts in is going to be a big one, and seeing those conversations happening. I guess the next one is going to be, are the traditional things that we've always done working? Is the phone working? Are email sequences working? Or do we have to think a little bit outside the box and be trying to be creative? And I think that's something that's done really nicely. It's made us more creative as salespeople already, I think. So yeah, new contacts in and conversations being had with completely cold prospects. And just tracking those usual behaviors, your phone, your email, your conversion rates, to discovery call, from discovery call to demo, just to see if the ways we've always done it aren't working. What do we have to do to be creative and get outside of those normal ways? And yeah, some really interesting ones, like people holding weekly golf lessons for their prospects online. So it's like a golf lesson webinar or comedy shows, just to get people engaged in new and creative ways. And obviously that you then get towards stuff like sending gifts, and gifting is becoming more prevalent, especially if you've got the right tool that can find people's home addresses or forwarding addresses, all that kind of thing, because it's just new ways of engaging people that are outside the norm in the new world.
Amazing. So to recap that, we should, in lieu of these conditions, some of the things we should monitor are the conversations being had with new people who are net new in the CRM, and the usual things we know are important, like phone calls, emails, and conversion numbers, being, putting a microscope on those and making sure we keep them under control. I like the next point, which I think we can take as a separate point, which is let's give reps freedom, or let's give them encouragement to create new ways to engage. I mean, it's been a period where I think it would be absolutely crazy to join a Zoom session with 100 people doing yoga. I could never do that. But now we see, my company's running communal exercise sessions. I like the comedy show, but I get the guitar out sometimes. Maybe to wrap it up, what's something that you're doing right now, Greg, that's a little crazy, or what personal talent are you using to create some new engagement with your prospects?
So I believe quite strongly in a Facebook page. It's fundamentally is a Facebook page called Charm Offensive, and it encourages creativity and copy, basically, for sales and marketing folks. And I've never believed that 3 bullet points about how brilliant you are works anyway, so I've never used that type of thing, but it is giving me more freedom, the current situation, to just be like, do you know what? I'll just put it in I'll put it in an email. I'll try and be funny. I'll try and point something out that's like different to what they'd normally receive in an email. And if it doesn't work and they tell me to go away, they tell me to go away, and we'll try a different approach with somebody else. But I think, that being slightly different, trying to, because copy's probably the best tool we've got right now. It is getting increasingly difficult to get people on the phone. So what you're putting in your emails, your LinkedIn messages, etc., they do have to stand out. So think about how you can use the copywriting skills you've got, or even people around you have got. If your brother's the funniest person you've ever met, ask him what he'd write in an email to a prospect if he was just trying to stand out and be comical. And I think that's the route I'm going down at the moment. It's not always the easiest when your audience financial directors necessarily, but I'm trying to find that balance between charm, offensive, comedic, and different, and what they want, which is obviously that very kind of blue personality, literal, how you're going to make my life better type situation. So I'm trying to combine those two things.
Well, I think if you've got the copy, you've already got the looks and the accent, so you're in a good place for that charm. Just to wrap up our chat now, do you think that there's anything or anyone that we should be following? If we could pick one thing other than what you just suggested, any sales advice or leadership out there that's working for you and your team?
So I would recommend taking a look at Charm Offensive, definitely, on Facebook. But somebody who does really, really good stuff. So obviously, I think one of the most famous ones is Colin Cadmus from Aircall, does really good stuff, but I won't be the only person to say that, and everyone will have probably seen his content. But there's a guy called Rich Smith, who is one of the founders, but also leads the revenue team at Refract, who are a sales coaching software in the northeast of England. And he's really putting a marker down in terms of writing great, helpful, supportive content, particularly around sales coaching. Every single day, good quality, long form content comes out that just makes you better. And I'm seeing elements of Sandler coming into there now, Sandler day-to-day sales, but also Sandler management. And I think, Rich Smith from Refract is certainly somebody that people should be following if they're not necessarily in that UK SaaS market, because I think he'd add a lot of value across the world, not just in the UK.
Perfect. And if we could call out one person in the world to come on this podcast, it doesn't matter who they are or what they do, who do you think we should grab and ask their advice about remote sales? Would it be him or someone else?
Rich would be good. Paul Fifield is fantastic, who runs Sales Impact Academy now, but has obviously done a couple of big exits. And Pete Crosby, who is now in charge of the Manchester Revenue Collective, is just one of probably the smartest sales leader I've had the pleasure of speaking to. Not necessarily around remote sales, but he knows numbers better than anybody else I've ever met. So, and Nazma Kaban from Cognism gets the most out of her SDRs and BDs and BDMs of anyone I've seen. So she'd also be a good person to have on as well, because she gets that extra 5%, 10% from everybody in her team.
That's great. Well, we've mentioned sneakily to get accept customers there as well. So that's a good segue to end the clip. But thank you very much for your advice. And Greg, how do we find you on social media? What's your favorite avenue for that?
LinkedIn. I absolutely love LinkedIn as a platform for Absolutely everything. So yeah, Greg Freeman, clean.ai. So that's spelled K-L-E-E-N-E, not like the cleaner. So yeah, clean.ai. Get me on LinkedIn, whatever, however you want to do it. DM, connection, don't really mind. I'll always accept.
Stay clean, get clean, especially at this time. And thank you,
Absolutely.
Greg, for joining us.